Move to the back where you belong. That was the first thing Avery Monroe heard. Loud, sharp, and meant to be heard by everyone in first class. The boarding pass was still warm in his hand when the flight attendant snatched it from his fingers like he was holding a fake ID. He blinked, stunned. Seat 1A, first class. His name was on it. His face matched the ID, but none of that mattered. Not to her. She looked him up and down. Black, hoodie, no luggage but a laptop bag, and something in her expression said, "You're not supposed to be here. Tell us where you're watching from. And what would you do if your child was told they didn't belong here?" "Ma'am," Avery said slowly, "that's my seat." The woman, Janelle Briggs, the flight attendant in full Navy uniform with a pin-straight bun and the practiced voice of fake kindness, didn't answer. She turned to the gate agent who had just stepped in behind him. "Possible seating fraud," she said loud enough for rows 1 through 5 to hear. "He claims to be first class. He, now. No name, no identity. Just he." Avery looked around. People were watching now. A woman across the aisle lowered her sunglasses. A man in 2D stopped scrolling on his phone. He stood there, 19 years old, suitless, shoelace tied, polite, and already labeled a problem. Janelle thrust the boarding pass at the gate agent, who looked about ready to roll his eyes but played along. He scanned it, blinked, scanned again. Green check, no issue. Still, she didn't move. "There must be an error in the system," she muttered, then looked at Avery like he'd hacked it. "I'm sorry," she added, the way people say, "bless your heart," before an insult. "But I'm going to need you to return to economy while we sort this out." "I'm not in economy," Avery said, keeping his tone flat. "I'm a registered VIP guest on this flight. FAA verification." Her eyes narrowed. "Do you have any real ID?" Avery handed her his government-issued card. Level 3 engineering clearance, FAA internal operations. She looked at it, then ignored it completely. That's when the murmurs started. The man in 1C leaned forward. A younger passenger began filming. A little red light blinked to life. Janelle noticed. Her voice rose, defensive now, like she needed to control the story. "Sir, if you continue to resist, we'll have to remove you from the aircraft." Resist? Avery hadn't moved. He had simply existed. A young black man in a hoodie with a federal ID, a real seat assignment, and the kind of calm that white-knuckled people don't know how to respond to. "I'm not resisting," Avery replied. "You're refusing to accept that someone like me belongs in a seat like this." Briggs turned red. She looked back at the gate agent, who was now clearly uncomfortable. "Get Paul," she snapped. "Supervisor." Minutes ticked. The boarding line paused. Overhead bins creaked open and shut. The cabin buzzed with unspoken questions. Then Paul Brenner, floor supervisor, appeared, tie askew, face already annoyed. "What's the situation?" Briggs stepped back like she had backup now. "This passenger won't return to coach. I suspect boarding pass tampering." Avery held up his phone. "Would you like to see the official FAA email and QR code?" Paul didn't look. He just eyed Avery from top to toe. Skin, clothes, age. And nodded slowly, like a judge about to make a ruling without a trial. "Sir, I'm gonna need you to step off the plane while we sort this out." "No," Avery said quietly. The word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Paul stiffened. "You want me to call security?" "Please do," Avery answered. "And when you do, tell them to bring someone from FAA clearance coordination." Paul blinked. "What?" Avery didn't repeat himself. Instead, he pulled a slim white card from his bag. No logo, just a black magnetic strip and a biometric chip. He pressed his thumb to the chip, unlocked his phone, opened an app not available to the public, tapped twice. Clear port ethics grid. Admin console active protocols. Clear out initiation. Flag. Onboard bias violation level 3. In progress. He didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, I was hoping I wouldn't need to do this today. A message popped up on his screen. Clear out protocol initiated. Cabin access suspended for flight AS447. Linked aircraft 6. FAA ethics review triggered. 480 unknown funding stream flagged. Briggs glanced over his shoulder at the screen. Her face went pale. What is that? You'll find out in 5 minutes, Avery said calmly. I suggest you don't touch anyone else until then. The cabin of flight AS447 felt like it had stopped breathing. No one moved. Not the passengers, not the crew, not even the air. Janelle Briggs slowly lowered her hand from Avery Monroe's boarding pass, now dropped somewhere near her feet like evidence she didn't want to be caught with. Across the aisle, the woman in 2B spoke for the second time that morning. Sweetheart, she said, eyes never leaving Avery. I think you just pressed a button we're all going to hear about on the news. Avery didn't answer. He didn't need to. His phone screen still glowed faintly in his hand, displaying a single line of white text on a midnight blue background. Clear out protocol engaged. FAA internal review in progress. No one in the cabin knew what clear out protocol was. Not yet, but they could feel it. Even Paul Brenner, the supervisor, took a step back, not because of anything Avery said, but because of the way his phone buzzed in his pocket 3 seconds later, followed by a high-pitched chirp from his airport-issued tablet. He pulled it out, fumbled the passcode, then frowned hard. A red alert banner scrolled across the top. FAA clearance system suspended. Flight AS447 immediate hold on all crew-level cabin authentications protocol flag. Level 3 ethics violation. Triggered by A. Monroe. FAA Tier 3 access. Paul blinked. Briggs, he said slowly. What did he just do? I don't know, she stammered. It's probably fake. He said something about the FAA, but that can't be. He's not lying, said the woman in 2B. I worked in HR for Homeland Security. That badge he showed, that's not something you buy on Etsy. Janelle's hand started to shake, just barely, but enough that passengers near the front noticed. A woman in 1C raised her phone and started live streaming, captioning the video. First-class discrimination. Something big is happening. Avery finally spoke. Cabin crew privileges have been revoked for the next 5 minutes, he said calmly. That includes system access, passenger data, internal routing, and seat assignments. Excuse me? Paul said. It'll be explained in the report you're about to get, Avery replied, then glanced at Janelle. You may want to notify your union rep. Janelle snapped. You can't just hijack a system like this. But even as she said it, another alert came through, this time over the cabin PA system. The captain's voice crackled through, sounding confused and irritated. Flight attendants, please hold boarding procedures. We've received a direct instruction from FAA Ethics Compliance to delay takeoff. A technical review is in progress. I repeat, this flight is under protocol review. The passengers behind Avery began murmuring. A man further back muttered, What the hell is going on? The woman live streaming whispered into her phone. He shut the whole damn flight down. No yelling, no threats. Just one touch on that screen. This kid is serious. Janelle turned to Paul again, her voice lower this time, almost a whisper. You've got to get him off the plane. Paul was staring at his own screen. We can't. Not unless we want to be liable for interfering with a federal ethics investigation. She stared at him. You're joking. He showed her the banner that had just flashed across his screen. Interference with clear-out protocol is a federal violation. FAA internal security has been alerted. In the back of the cabin, someone coughed loudly. A second later, the red notification light above the flight deck turned amber. Ground crew were calling in. San Antonio Tower, Control Room 3. On the other side of the terminal, deep in the control center, 2 FAA systems analysts watched in silence as a massive chain reaction began flashing across their screens. What just happened to 6 linked aircraft? What do you mean? I mean they just got flagged, simultaneously. Ethics grid just triggered for AS447, and now 6 flights sharing its pilot scheduling and cabin crew routing just got tagged for secondary review. You mean, This one flight triggered a sweep? Yep. And who's the flagging operator? The analyst zoomed in. Holy crap, she whispered. Avery Monroe. Back on flight AS-447, Janelle's smile was gone. So was her authority. She stood next to Paul like she needed him to breathe for her. But he looked just as pale. Avery didn't gloat. He just returned to the seat he was supposed to be in, 1A, and sat down quietly, like nothing had happened. He didn't pull out his laptop, didn't even put on headphones. He just stared forward, calm as ever. The quiet confidence wasn't arrogance. It was training. Because you don't build federal systems that can stop planes mid-boarding without learning how to sit still while the world panics around you. 2 rows back, a passenger in business casual leaned into the aisle. I'm sorry to interrupt, he said, raising his hand. But is anyone going to explain what's happening? Janelle stepped forward to speak, but Paul beat her to it. There's been a temporary hold placed by FAA, Paul said. It's under internal review. That guy back there caused it? Paul hesitated. The woman in 2B cut in. Yes, because he was racially profiled and removed from his seat despite having full clearance. Turns out he works on the system that lets FAA evaluate airline behavior in real time. Gasps. The word racially profiled hit the cabin like a sudden drop in altitude. The business casual man looked at Avery again. So he wasn't causing a problem? No, the woman said calmly. He is the system, and he just flagged all of us for bias review because one of our flight crew treated him like he didn't belong. Across social media. 6 minutes later, Twitter, @PassengerJustice. Breaking, teen engineer triggers nationwide ethics lockdown after being profiled on flight AS-447. #Clearport, now let him fly. @FAA Justice Instagram. Live stream clip. Y'all, he didn't yell, he didn't fight, he just pressed a screen, and the entire flight shut down. TikTok. Sound. Low cabin noise, plus female voice whispering. This kid just stopped 6 planes with 1 button. San Antonio Airport, FAA briefing room. A phone rang. Dr. Evelyn Black, Chief Technology Advisor at FAA and Avery's project mentor, answered it on the 3rd ring. This is Evelyn. Your boy just triggered clear-out on AS-47, said the voice on the other end. It's working exactly as you designed it. I figured it would. There's already footage, going viral. I know, she said, eyes on the live Twitter feed. Let it burn. We'll respond when the ethics report is complete. Back in 1A, Avery finally exhaled. He hadn't spoken in minutes. He didn't need to. Everyone was watching now. Even Janelle, standing just a few feet away, looked like she didn't know whether to sit, run, or cry. Avery turned toward her, voice low enough so only she could hear. You should have just looked at the pass. She opened her mouth, closed it, said nothing. He leaned back, shut his eyes, and whispered. Not for her, not for Paul, not for the passengers, just for himself. Bias only works when it goes unrecorded. And for the first time on flight AS-447, Janelle Briggs said nothing at all. The departure monitors inside San Antonio International Airport started blinking yellow around 10:07 a.m. One by one, 6 flights, all connected by some thread of crew scheduling or internal routing, were marked delayed, FAA internal review. Most passengers didn't notice. Not yet. But inside the Clearport Data Control Center, located in a glassed-off wing of the FAA's local division building, 2 analysts were fully aware of what had just happened. We just lost live access on all 6 flights. Clearport? Yeah. Protocol Level 3 triggered. All cabin-based behavioral metrics are locked pending ethics review. Who's the trigger? The screen refreshed. Triggered by Monroe. A. Tier 3. FAA Access Protocol. Clear out. Active. The younger analyst let out a long whistle. Who the hell gave a teenager the kill switch? Her supervisor didn't even blink. Not a teenager, he said. That's the kid who helped build the protocol. Back on flight AS-447, Paul Brenner's tablet buzzed again. He glanced down and read the newest update. AS-447. Crew status. Suspended access all connected routes under Clearport audit total. FAA flagged flights. 6 connected funds. 480 million. Flagged pending ethics score. Re-evaluation. He wasn't sure what hit him harder. The suspension of access, or the freeze on nearly $500 million in federal funding for Aerostar Airlines. And he realized, too late, it had started with a boarding pass. A boarding pass he never actually read. Across the aisle, Janelle Briggs stood like someone awaiting sentencing. Her spine stiff, her hands behind her back, lips drawn so tight they'd practically vanished. She wasn't talking anymore. The live stream counter on the passenger's phone now showed 13,487 viewers, and climbing fast. Most comments were variations of, "Get her fired." He handled that like a king. Aerostar's about to lose millions. Where's the CEO now? Inside the cockpit, Captain Dan Kessler got the call he'd been dreading. "Captain," came the voice from Ops Command. "We're under protocol lockdown. Flight is grounded until we receive a final review decision from FAA Ethics." Kessler rubbed his temple. "How long?" "No estimate yet. But this might go straight to DC." He looked at the co-pilot, who gave him a raised eyebrow. "Seriously, look." Kessler nodded grimly. "I think we just got FAA'd." In a private suite inside FAA HQ in Washington, D.C., Dr. Evelyn Black was already being looped into a live stream of flight AS-4447. The voice feed came through first, low cabin noise, hushed whispers. Then Avery's voice, clipped and clear. "Cabin crew privileges have been revoked for the next 5 minutes. That includes system access, passenger data, internal routing, and seat assignments." Evelyn paused the stream and looked at her deputy. He executed clear-out solo. The man across from her, a senior policy director, nodded slowly. "Clean activation, full procedural integrity." Evelyn sat back. "Then we're past the point of containment. This is going public." "It already is." Aerostar Airlines, Executive Suite, Dallas HQ. The call came through at 10:13 a.m. CEO Bryce Whitman had just walked into his 17th floor office when his assistant flagged him down. "Sir, there's a situation." "There's always a situation," he muttered, sipping espresso. "Not like this." She handed him a tablet. The screen showed 6 flights delayed, $480 million in funding marked pending, and FAA Ethics Center marked live review. His face went pale. What triggered this? "A teenager," she replied. "Passenger on AS-447, black male, first-class ticket. Was kicked out by a flight attendant. He activated something called Clear Out." Bryce didn't move, didn't blink. Because deep down, he knew exactly what that was. He'd signed the damn contract. On flight AS-447, the woman in 2B leaned toward Avery's seat. "What happens next?" Avery looked up, calm as ever. "I wait." "For what?" "For the system to do what it was designed to do." The woman nodded, then smiled. "Well," she said, "it's doing it." Passengers all around began whispering, checking their phones. The live stream count passed 15,000. The man from 1C spoke up now. "I used to work in corporate finance," he said. "When money freezes, people at the top start losing their minds." Avery didn't smile, but he didn't deny it. DC, FAA Ethics Oversight Division, 10:27 a.m. A meeting was already in progress when the Secretary of Transportation's liaison walked in. "We need to talk about AS-447. Dr. Evelyn Black stood, already reviewing. "The President's Ethics Office just got pinged." Heads turned. The room quieted. Live streams are trending globally. Hatcher Clearport is #1 on Twitter, and FAA systems are being hailed as too powerful to be left in the hands of unsupervised youth. Unsupervised? Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "He was supervised. By me." A pause. The liaison nodded. "Then I guess this becomes a case study. A public one." Evelyn turned to the screen again. "Good." Aerostar Airlines, HQ, 10:39 a.m. Bryce Whitman was on a call with the FAA's legal division. "You're telling me a 19-year-old can ground our fleet?" "Not your fleet," the FAA rep replied. "Just the parts tied to Clearport integrated cabin crews, which is half our domestic routes." "Then perhaps," the rep said calmly, "your crews shouldn't kick out credentialed passengers with federal-level access." Bryce slammed his hand on the desk. "Do you know what this does to investor confidence? We're not here to discuss stock prices, Mr. Whitman. We're here to discuss ethics." Flight AS-447, 10:43 a.m. The captain re-entered the cabin. He looked around, paused, then cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've just received confirmation that our flight will be delayed indefinitely, pending full federal review." Whispers erupted. Gasps. Some groaned. Others opened their camera apps. But no one blamed the delay on Avery anymore. They knew better now. He was no longer some kid in a hoodie. He was the line between assumption and consequence. Janelle Briggs finally sat down, in the crew jump seat, far from the front row. Her hands still shook. No one looked at her. No one comforted her. She stared at the cabin wall and whispered to no one, "I didn't know who he was." And across the aisle, the woman in 2B whispered back, "You didn't have to. You just had to know what respect looks like." The live view count passed 23,000. At first, it had been a few curious followers watching the woman in 1C's Instagram stream. Now, TikTok had picked it up. So had Twitter. So had @Justice@30K feet, a travel ethics watchdog page with over 2 million followers. And the caption beneath the video told the whole story in one breathless sentence. "Flight attendant tries to kick black teen out of first class. Doesn't know he built the FAA system that just suspended her." Janelle Briggs couldn't feel her fingertips anymore. Her pulse was pounding in her ears, but she forced herself to keep standing near the galley wall. Face neutral, chin slightly raised, as if posture might protect her. The captain had made the announcement. The flight was grounded. The cabin crew had been stripped of operational access, but she was still waiting on the part that mattered. What happens to her? She hadn't received a message. Not officially. No one had said, "You're being terminated." No one had said, "You're under investigation." But the silence from the rest of the crew? The glance Paul Brenner gave her as he walked past? That told her more than any message ever could. She watched Avery from a distance, like she might catch him gloating. He wasn't. He just sat in 1A, elbows on armrests, phone face down on his lap, looking like someone who had already moved on to the next stage of the plan. FAA. Ethics Oversight Briefing, Washington, D.C. "Let's be clear," Evelyn Black said, standing at the head of a long oak conference table inside the FAA's national HQ. "This isn't just a PR incident. This is an integrity breach flagged by one of our own systems, triggered by its co-architect." A hush passed over the room. One of the compliance officers at the table, mid-50s, gray suit, skeptical by nature, leaned forward. "You're saying the passenger on AS-447 is the engineer who wrote the behavioral scoring protocol?" "Yes," Evelyn said flatly. "Avery Monroe, Level 3 FAA contributor. His name is coded into the metadata of the Clearport ethics grid." Someone in the back cursed under their breath. The room shifted. "He flagged a Level 3 violation?" "Confirmed. Triggered clear out. System responded as designed. Cabin crew access suspended. Linked flights auto-audited. $480 million in pending compliance funds frozen until investigation is resolved." "What did the crew do to trigger it?" Evelyn's expression didn't change. "They told him to move to economy. They told him he didn't belong in first class." Another pause. Then the DOT representative at the end of the table said slowly, "They didn't know who they were talking to." Aerostar Airlines, Executive War Room. Dallas CEO Bryce Whitman had thrown on a jacket over his golf shirt and canceled his lunch with investors. The emergency board meeting was already live. 6 squares glowed on the screen in front of him. Legal, PR, compliance, operations, investor relations, and one very tight-lipped liaison from the Department of Transportation. He didn't even sit. He stood at the head of the table, hands braced on the edge of the screen. Where are we on control? Legal shook their head. FAA locked us out of the Clearport systems. We have no access to internal crew metrics or cabin behavior data. They've frozen $480 million in incentive credits. Passengers, Bryce barked. Flight AS447 is stationary. No one's been allowed to deplane. Social media's on fire. Our Twitter tags are a mess. Multiple live streams hit over 100K views this hour. What about the kid? PR cleared their throat. Name is Avery Monroe. 19, based in Austin. FAA clearance. Invited speaker for the Aviation Ethics Futures Summit in DC this week. He's a damn speaker? Yes, sir, and one of the registered authors on the Clearport white paper we co-signed last year. Bryce closed his eyes for one long, measured second. Then he opened them and said, "We didn't just kick out a kid. We kicked out the kid who helped write the rule book. Flight AS447, mid-cabin, 11:11 a.m. The live streams kept going. Now the press was watching. ABC, CBS, The Shade Room, MSNBC, all had reporters quoting comments from passengers on board. The trending clip, Avery, seated calmly in 1A, saying just one line to Janelle earlier. "You should have just looked at the pass." Short, chilling, perfectly soundbiteable. Paul Brenner sat on the jump seat in the back of the plane, head in his hands. He'd reviewed the boarding pass. He knew it had scanned green, but he hadn't spoken up. He let Janelle control the situation, thinking it would resolve itself, thinking the kid would cave, take the seat in the back, and spare them all the drama. But he hadn't. And now, Paul could feel the walls closing in around him too. CNN Live segment, 11:27 a.m. We're tracking an extraordinary situation unfolding at San Antonio International Airport. A black teen, confirmed as Avery Monroe, 19, FAA contributor, was removed from his first-class seat. Minutes later, he triggered a federal protocol that locked the flight crew's access system and initiated an ethics review affecting 6 other flights. The anchor turned to a guest expert on aviation law. "How significant is this?" The expert leaned forward. "This is unprecedented. We've never had a protocol like clear-out activated mid-boarding, especially by someone who helped engineer the framework." And the airline? They're in trouble. Financially, reputationally, structurally. This protocol affects federal funding eligibility tied to passenger dignity metrics. Aerostar could lose hundreds of millions if their ethics score drops below compliant. Avery's phone. Quiet ping at 11:33 a.m. A single message appeared on his lock screen. From E. Black. "You okay? FAA in full review. You did everything by protocol. Do not respond to press. We'll handle the fallout." He didn't respond. He just looked around. People were still watching him like he was a bomb they didn't hear ticking. In the far corner, a flight attendant whispered to Janelle, "You think they'll fire us?" Janelle didn't answer. She looked out the window, jaw clenched. "They don't need to fire us," she said softly. "They already did. System just hasn't updated yet." The ethics report dropped at 2:12 p.m. Eastern. Only 6 pages long, but it was devastating. Across 42 federal airports, compliance officers opened an alert stamped with urgent red headers. Alert! Aerostar Airlines flagged as non-compliant under Clearport Ethics Grid. Section 3 violation, passenger displacement due to profile bias. There was no ambiguity in the language, no legal hedging. It was simple, cold, and final. Flight AS447. Incident time, 10:34 a.m. CST. Trigger, Level 3 violation. Victim, Avery Monroe, 19 years old. FAA registered system contributor. One of the authors of the very protocol that now penalized the airline. The trigger wasn't someone yelling. It wasn't a viral video. It was a single data packet, submitted by someone who knew exactly how to make it count. At Aerostar headquarters in Dallas, the mood was ice cold. CEO Bryce Whitman stood in front of a giant dashboard screen in the command center as the company's stock slipped in real time, 11.8% down, still falling. His general counsel whispered updates he already expected. 4 airports have pulled our expedited service agreements. 2 have frozen ramp priority access. Legal is reviewing the implications. He cut her off. How much is locked? $480 million in federal compliance-based credits. Frozen until the ethics rating is brought back above Tier 3. Bryce shook his head and slammed the tablet shut. All this because some damn kid? He's not just a kid, his chief of ethics murmured. Everyone turned. He's Avery Monroe. The FAA invited him to speak in D.C. next week. He co-authored the Clearport Ethics Grid. His name is written into the compliance framework. Bryce stared at the floor. Nobody said it aloud, but they all knew the same thing. They hadn't just messed with a passenger. They had messed with the architect of the alarm system. At FAA headquarters in D.C., the Ethics Oversight Division held an emergency press conference just after 2:30 p.m. Director Evelyn Black stepped in front of cameras and delivered the statement with steely calm. This morning, a violation was flagged during pre-flight operations of Aerostar Airlines Flight AS447. The ethics alert originated from a co-author of the FAA's Clearport Evaluation System. Due to the severity, we've issued a temporary non-compliant classification for the airline, suspended federal credits, and activated airport-level cooperation holds. Reporters swarmed with questions. Was the victim Avery Monroe? Yes, she answered. Is this about racial profiling? Evelyn's pause was brief but powerful. We classify this incident as unjustified passenger displacement. The exact language in the report notes racial and perceptual bias. We take this seriously, and this will be treated as a precedent-setting case. While the world debated, the cabin of Flight AS447 remained grounded at Gate 17. Avery hadn't spoken a word. He still sat quietly in Seat 1A, his phone on airplane mode, his gaze steady out the window. He didn't tweet, he didn't argue, he didn't film a thing. And yet, the world outside was erupting on his behalf. The most viral clip wasn't the altercation. It wasn't even Janelle Briggs yelling. It was a still shot. Avery sitting still. The caption? He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He built the system and let it speak. Over 600,000 shares in 4 hours. On MSNBC, the headline read, "The architect who let the alarm ring." At Aerostar, the legal department was already triaging crew responses. Paul, the second crew member, had been pulled into an immediate debrief. Janelle, however, received something more direct, a formal alert from Human Resources. Ms. Briggs, per directive of the FAA Ethics Division and interim compliance statutes, you are to report to FAA headquarters in Washington, D.C. within 48 hours for a formal disciplinary hearing. Your crew access credentials have been temporarily revoked. Travel will be arranged under ethics suspension. She didn't speak. She didn't even blink. She just stared at her screen while her hands trembled on her lap. Paul paced a few feet away, mid-call. Judging by the way he kept nodding and muttering, "Yes, understood," it wasn't going well for him either. No one spoke to Avery. No one even looked directly at him anymore. He wasn't angry. He wasn't smug. But something about his stillness made people more nervous than if he had shouted. Inside the FAA Command Center, Evelyn Black received confirmation. The clear-out trigger had been verified by 3 independent teams. One of her advisors leaned over and said quietly, "It was flawless. No tampering, no overreach. It followed the playbook by the letter." She nodded. "What's Monroe's media activity?" "Zero. He hasn't posted. No interviews, not even a comment." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "He knows. This kid knows the power of letting the system work." That's what was terrifying. Not his anger, his control. Back on the flight, Janelle gathered her things. She moved stiffly, like every motion took effort. She didn't try to speak to Avery. She didn't try to apologize. She passed him without making eye contact. But just before stepping into the jet bridge, she hesitated. Her head turned slightly, just enough to catch his profile. He didn't react. He just sat there, calm, balanced. But as she turned fully toward him, just for a second, he looked her straight in the eyes and gave the smallest shake of his head. No words, just You did this to yourself." And then she walked out. As the cabin door sealed, a chime echoed overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, this flight will remain grounded pending FAA clearance. We thank you for your patience." One row behind Avery, a woman in sunglasses whispered to the man next to her, "That boy didn't just win, he rewrote the whole damn playbook." Avery exhaled slowly. No press statement, no camera, just peace. He had always known that one day, the system would be tested by the very people who built it. And when that moment came, he would be ready. He didn't raise his voice, he raised the standard. The CEO of Aerostar Airlines had never stood in front of more cameras in his life. The press conference was scheduled for 4 p.m. sharp. By 3:45, the room was packed with reporters, stakeholders, ethics observers, and FAA reps. Cameras lined the walls. Microphones from every major news outlet pointed toward the podium. When Bryce Whitman walked out, he looked like a man who hadn't slept in 2 days. His tie was tight, but his eyes were exhausted. He adjusted the mic. "Good afternoon." No smile, no pleasantries. "This morning, Aerostar Airlines failed to uphold the ethical expectations we promised to every customer. A young man, Mr. Avery Monroe, was removed from his seat in a manner that was not only unjust, but in direct violation of both FAA standards and our own internal policies." The room was silent. Bryce continued, forcing calm. "We accept full responsibility for this incident. Our internal review has begun. The flight crew involved has been temporarily suspended pending investigation, and we are cooperating fully with the FAA and the Clearport Ethics Division." A reporter near the front raised her hand. "Is it true Mr. Monroe helped create the system that penalized you?" Bryce blinked. "Yes. Mr. Monroe is a registered contributor to the Clearport Ethics Grid and a respected young engineer whose work has directly influenced the future of aviation accountability." "Did you know that before the incident?" Another pause. "No," he admitted. "But that's the point. We shouldn't need someone to be famous or powerful or connected to treat them with basic respect." For the first time all day, that line actually sounded genuine. But Bryce wasn't done. "There's one more announcement." He glanced at his chief legal officer, who nodded silently. "We've invited Mr. Monroe and his father to meet with our board of directors, not just for an apology, but to propose immediate reforms to how we train, evaluate, and retain ethical flight crews moving forward." Another reporter fired a quick follow-up. "And who is his father?" Before Bryce could answer, a door to the side of the room opened. All heads turned. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped into view. He didn't walk with arrogance, but with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to explain himself. Someone used to being in the room where decisions happen. Bryce's voice dropped slightly. "Please welcome Mr. Julian Monroe." Some recognized the name immediately. Others had to whisper, "Julian Monroe." Founder of Signal Corps, a federal compliance AI firm used by multiple U.S. agencies. Former White House tech advisor. And recently, special ethics consultant to the Department of Transportation, Avery's father. Julian stepped up beside Bryce without shaking hands. He didn't speak right away, just surveyed the room calmly, then leaned toward the mic. "My son didn't need me to speak for him." He paused, letting the silence breathe. But what happened on that plane didn't just disrespect him, it exposed the gap between public policy and airline enforcement. And that gap ends today. He removed a folded document from his coat pocket. "This is a formal request, jointly authored by myself, the FAA Ethics Council, and several advocacy partners, for the fast-track approval of what we're calling the Passenger Ethics Emergency Act." He held the paper high. "This charter outlines mandatory industry standards for real-time behavior tracking of airline personnel, cross-referenced with FAA training data and passenger profiling audits. It is based on the Clearport grid, and it was partially drafted by the young man your airline dismissed as unimportant." A surge of camera shutters filled the room. Julian's tone remained even. "You had the blueprint flying in seat 1A, and instead of listening, you removed him." He stepped back from the mic. That was all he needed to say. Bryce looked like he had aged 5 years in 5 minutes. The moderator tried to move the press along, but the room was buzzing with only one name now: Avery Monroe. Meanwhile, in the gallery above the press floor, Avery stood quietly with a badge clipped to his blazer. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't even making eye contact with the press, but he was watching. He watched his father speak, watched Bryce fumble, watched the press lean forward like hawks. Next to him, a FAA policy director whispered, "You ready for tomorrow?" Avery nodded. "Congress wants your testimony. They're putting the act on the emergency schedule." "I'll be there," Avery said simply. That night, every major outlet ran the story with the same tone. The system didn't save him. He built the system, and now he's building the rules. Back in San Antonio, Janelle Briggs sat alone in a hotel room. She had watched the press conference 3 times. The first time, she was angry. The second time, numb. The third time, she simply cried. Not because she'd been fired, though that hurt. Not because she was embarrassed, though she was. She cried because for the first time she understood that what she did wasn't just cruel. It was deeply, structurally wrong. And the person she judged wasn't just a kid. He was the mirror held up to the industry, and she was the reflection no one wanted to see. Back in Washington, Avery sat at a dinner table across from 3 FAA executives. They didn't talk about revenge. They talked about policy, about enforcement architecture, public transparency dashboards, real-time crew ethics scoring, and Avery's role as chief technical advisor to the rollout committee. He didn't seem excited, just calm, focused. One exec leaned in and asked, "What do you want this to feel like? To the passengers?" Avery answered without hesitation. "Safe, seen, and if something goes wrong, silent, but immediate justice." The room went quiet. One official wrote down his words word for word. The next day, the Passenger Ethics Emergency Act was formally introduced in Congress. Within 48 hours, 3 major airlines had signed early adoption agreements. Within 5 days, 6 airports had implemented pre-clearance crew scans using Clearport's pilot interface. And within a week, Avery Monroe was being interviewed on CNN. But even then, he didn't smile much. When the host asked, "Do you feel vindicated?" he just shook his head. "No, I feel responsible, because now I know how many others never got a chance to push that button." And that was the point. It was never about revenge. It was about building a system so solid, so fair, so intelligent, that one day, no 19-year-old kid would need to activate it at all. By Friday morning, the ripple effect was no longer a ripple. It was a wave. The Passenger Ethics Emergency Act, barely 36 hours old, was already moving through the halls of Congress faster than most aviation bills did in 6 months. But what caught everyone off guard wasn't just the speed. It was the domino effect happening across the airline industry. The FAA's compliance site crashed twice that morning. Airline executives were scrambling, not because they didn't understand the stakes, but because they never expected a teenager to set them. Avery Monroe wasn't trending anymore. He was being cited. His name had now appeared in 3 regulatory memos, 1 ethics directive, and 2 internal training guides at competing airlines. His quiet stare from seat 1A had become a case study, the kind corporate ethics teams would dissect for years. By 9:00 a.m., 3 major airlines, Unity Air, North Sail, and Pacific Glide, had signed preliminary adoption agreements for the Passenger Ethics Emergency Act. None of them wanted to end up like Arrow's star. They had seen what happened when a system designed to observe quietly was suddenly used publicly. At a closed-door meeting in Atlanta, Unity Air's COO said flatly, "If a 19-year-old kid can freeze $480 million without yelling, our problem isn't public relations, it's architecture." Across the industry, internal compliance teams raced to adapt. They weren't just rewriting rules, they were scanning flight manifests, profiling their own profiling patterns, building real-time crew behavior dashboards overnight. At JFK, an ethics officer was overheard telling his team, We're not preventing the next Avery Monroe story. We're preventing the next 2,000 that didn't make headlines. Meanwhile, the FAA made their next move. At 11:15 a.m., a formal email was issued to all non-signatory airlines. Per interim compliance statutes under the Passenger Ethics Emergency Act, all carriers who fail to submit Tier 1 engagement intent by Monday, 9:02 a.m. EST will be placed under provisional review status. This may result in the suspension of FAA-backed credits, crew clearance pre-codes, and ramp priority access. The industry heard it loud and clear. Sign the ethics charter, or get left on the tarmac. Back at Aerostar headquarters, the mood was grim. Janelle Briggs's removal had been formalized. Paul's employment had been suspended pending ethics reassessment. The rest of the crew from Flight AS447 was placed under intensive review. But the consequences didn't stop there. 2 airports, Charlotte Douglas, CLT, and Denver International, DEN, issued joint statements saying they would temporarily halt special cooperation agreements with any airline not in compliance with the Act. That included Aerostar. Ground slots were reassigned, priority hangars revoked, fueling contracts rebid, losses estimated at $72.4 million, and counting. Meanwhile, passengers were watching too. On social media, a quiet revolution was brewing. A new hashtag emerged. FlyFair. It wasn't a brand. It wasn't owned by any airline. It was a declaration. Under the tag, thousands of passengers began posting their experiences, some recent, others from years ago, about mistreatment, racial bias, profiling, and silent humiliations they had swallowed quietly at 30,000 feet. But this time, they had a framework, a language, a precedent. One woman wrote, "When they made my autistic son get off the plane, I had no one to call. Now, I tag hashtag FlyFair and I cite Monroe v. AS447. Even the legal world took note." Avi Harlow, a civil rights attorney based in Boston, tweeted, "This is not just an aviation ethics reform. This is the start of a standardized dignity protocol in American transportation." Within 48 hours, 2 class action lawsuits were filed against Aerostar, one on behalf of past passengers who had been involuntarily downgraded under ambiguous circumstances, and another by a former employee who claimed internal pressure to flag certain passengers as non-cohesive flyers. Both referenced clear port logs as evidence. Back in Washington, Avery sat in a modest side office at the FAA building. Not in a press room. Not on TV. Just a quiet room with a desk, a whiteboard, and a small digital terminal loaded with the latest beta version of the passenger ethics grid. 2 engineers sat with him. One was adjusting facial detection settings for microaggression flagging. The other was testing scenario simulations. Avery didn't say much. He just pointed occasionally at lines of code. "Too sensitive here. You'll get false triggers." "What about here?" the engineer asked. "That's good," Avery said. "It detects tone escalation before it becomes verbal. Smart." An intern stepped in with a printed update. "Mr. Monroe, 6 more airports signed ethics on boarding this morning, including Miami and Portland." He nodded. No smile. No celebration. Just focus. After she left, one of the engineers leaned back in his chair. "You know," he said, "you could be doing interviews. Tech startups would throw money at you right now. Half the industry's ready to make you the face of something." Avery didn't even look up. "That's not the point." "What is then?" He finally met the engineer's eyes. That one day, someone gets kicked off a flight, and the system already knew it was wrong before they even hit the floor. That was Avery's quiet mission. Not to become the story, but to build the system so no one like him had to be the story again. Later that night, on a live panel discussion, an aviation strategist summed it up best. The tragedy for Aerostar wasn't just the incident. It's that they didn't realize who was in seat 1A. They were flying with the fire marshal, and they lit a match anyway. The audience didn't laugh. They nodded, because that was the new reality. Power didn't look like a badge. It didn't yell. It didn't throw tantrums. It sat silently. watched, and knew exactly when to trigger a response. It started with one voice, an older woman, maybe 60s, calm, poised. No anger, just clarity. She sat in a softly lit home office and looked straight into her laptop's webcam. "My name is Carolyn Dupree. I flew Aerostar Airlines last November. I was in business class, seat 3C. A flight attendant made me switch seats with a white gentleman who claimed his back couldn't handle the middle row. I asked why I was chosen. She said, 'We're trying to avoid a scene.' So I moved. Quietly. I didn't make it a thing. But it never sat right with me, and after seeing what happened to Mr. Monroe, I finally realized." She paused. "I didn't belong in the back of that plane. He didn't belong out of his seat. And none of us belong in a system where silence is the price of peace." She clicked upload. Within 5 hours, her video had over 2.4 million views. By midnight, she wasn't alone. A young teacher posted a story about being told her natural hair might block the view of the in-flight screen. A war veteran recalled how he'd been pulled aside for random checks 6 times in a row flying Aerostar, even after showing TSA global entry credentials. A father shared a moment when his autistic son was told to speak more clearly by a flight crew member, then warned he'd be removed if he didn't comply. One story became 10. 10 became hundreds. Then came the hashtags. #I was 1A2 and #passenger ethics now. It wasn't just a moment anymore, it was a reckoning. And Avery watched it all from a quiet side room in DC, surrounded by 3 monitors and a rolling whiteboard filled with system diagrams. He didn't repost, he didn't comment. He just took notes. Who was impacted? What language was used? What behavior flags matched existing parameters? Because for Avery, this wasn't just vindication. It was data, real-life reinforcement for the framework he and his team had designed. At exactly 2:15 p.m., Clearport Systems posted its first public update since the Monroe incident. Effective immediately, the Clearport Ethics Grid v3.1 has moved from beta to federal implementation phase. Participating airlines must onboard within 45 days to maintain full FAA privileges. The grid now includes real-time behavior monitoring for in-flight crews, passenger profile pattern audits, facial micro-expression flagging for bias events, escalation logs matched against training compliance, immediate alert triggers to FAA Ethics Desk for verified violations. Underneath the post was a simple signature. A. Monroe, System Co-Architect. J. Monroe, FAA Ethics Advisor. The world read it and knew. This wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was infrastructure. The following week, 4 more airports announced onboarding. Airlines that had previously brushed off reform, now rushing to schedule their Clearport training briefings. The language changed too. Airline statements no longer said, "We're looking into ethics options." Now they said, "We are a Tier 1 Clearport compliant carrier." Passengers started asking about it before buying tickets. "I'm flying with my kid. Do y'all run Clearport? Is your staff trained on Monroe protocols?" The power dynamic had flipped. For once, the passenger had a standard to hold power to, and Avery had quietly become the face of a shift airlines couldn't delay. And still, Avery stayed silent. Publicly, at least. But behind the scenes, he was everywhere. Meetings with FAA integration engineers, private webinars for legal compliance officers, closed-door briefings with Senate oversight staff. But one meeting hit different. It was a video call. Small, intimate, just 6 participants. Among them was an elderly black man, seated by a fireplace. He didn't say much at first, just listened. Finally, he looked up and said, "I'm proud of you, son. I flew Tuskegee back in '62. Got told I didn't look official enough to be in uniform. Walked off the plane. Swore I'd never fly commercial again. And I didn't. Until last year." He paused. "They put me in the last row again." He chuckled, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You're changing more than protocols, boy. You're changing ghosts. You're letting folks like me finally breathe." Avery didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded. That night, for the first time in weeks, Avery left the DC office early. He rode a city bike down toward the Jefferson Memorial, sat near the edge of the water with his hoodie up, phone off. No cameras, no headlines, just silence. And in that silence, he realized something. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't scared, or embarrassed, or even hurt. He was building. What had started as a shove out of a seat had turned into the seatbelt fastening across an entire industry. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, an FAA official quietly passed Avery a report. Internal compliance violations flagged by the grid across 4 airlines in just 48 hours. Some minor, some serious, but all recorded, all real. The system was working. Passengers weren't yelling. They didn't need to. Because now, if something happened mid-air, the grid was watching. At exactly 7 o'clock a.m. Monday morning, the first hammer fell. Aerostar Flight 902 from Dallas to New York was cleared for taxiing when the cockpit received a hard stop directive. The message came through encrypted FAA line. Clearport grid, incident match flag, pending ethics review, taxi clearance revoked, do not depart. The pilot froze. He'd never seen a full override before, not even during weather threats. In the terminal, 137 passengers were told their flight was delayed due to logistical realignment. What they weren't told: the crew had been flagged, and that wasn't the only flight. By 9:17 a.m., 6 Aerostar flights from Seattle, Chicago, Miami, Newark, Phoenix, and Dallas were grounded due to matching violations in the new Clearport ethics grid. Each one had the same trigger pattern: past crew with unresolved behavior flags, combined with risk indicators and onboard protocols. It was no longer theoretical. The system was operational. And it was pulling planes from the sky. Aerostar's boardroom erupted. "Is this retaliation?" one VP snapped. "No," another answered. "It's automated. These aren't personal decisions. We gave the system the data. It's just finally doing something with it." An eerie silence fell over the room. Because that was the real fear now. They couldn't control it anymore. The grid wasn't waiting for PR statements. It didn't pause for spin. It didn't need public outrage. It flagged. It froze. It escalated. By noon, the FAA Ethics Office confirmed what executives had feared. Aerostar Airlines has failed to meet Tier 1 baseline under the Passenger Ethics Emergency Act. As a result, all FAA-funded flight clearances involving flagged personnel are hereby suspended pending full retraining certification. Translation: no cleared takeoffs until crews are retrained. No cleared landing rights at 5 federal hubs. No funding support, no bluff. Aerostar's stock dropped 18% in under 4 hours. And yet, Avery Monroe? He said nothing. He wasn't in a press room or giving a TED talk. He was sitting quietly in a closed ethics meeting at the FAA, listening as regulators discussed whether to mandate the grid for all international code share agreements. "The moment we make Clearport mandatory for global carriers," one official said, "we don't just change American aviation. We change the rules of the sky." Back at Aerostar HQ, CEO Linda Barrett finally made the call. She didn't call a lawyer. She didn't call a PR firm. She called Marcus Wells, the same man Avery had called 5 minutes after being kicked out of first class. "Marcus," she said, not even bothering with pleasantries, "I need help." There was a pause, then a slow, deliberate response. "You need ethics." She exhaled. "You want me to beg?" "No. I want you to acknowledge that your system was broken, that your people were trained to assume what belongs in first class based on who, not how, and that now you've created a culture where the only way to enforce decency is with a machine watching your every move." Another pause. "And?" Linda Barrett swallowed hard. "And I was wrong." There it was. Not a PR statement, not a tweet. A real admission. One-on-one. Marcus didn't gloat. He simply said, "Then sign the full Clearport compliance charter. No carve-outs, no edits. Full Tier 1 standard, and you'll get your planes back in the air. Linda stared at the blinking cursor on her computer screen, then opened the contract and signed. Within 30 minutes, FAA issued conditional clearance to Aerostar to resume domestic operations under supervision. But the cost, $480 million in credit lines still frozen. 6 executive resignations demanded mandatory retraining of every single flight crew by month's end, public audit of all Clearport logs involving flagged behavior in the past 24 months. Aerostar didn't just surrender, they folded, publicly. At that same hour, Avery walked out of the FAA building. No cameras followed, no applause. But across terminals nationwide, something subtle had changed. Flight attendants were speaking more carefully. Gate agents double-checked seating charts. Supervisors hovered where they once ignored. And passengers? Passengers weren't scared to speak up anymore, because they knew now, even when the cabin was silent, someone was watching. It didn't happen with a bang. No breaking headline. No emergency press conference. Just a gentle chime on millions of phones. Clearport compliance audit, public dashboard now live. The link went viral in under an hour. Anyone could click in and see it. Flight number, route, date, and whether the crew on that flight had been flagged for any ethics violations under the Passenger Integrity Protocol. Green meant clear. Yellow meant pending review. Red? Red meant someone got hurt and no one did anything about it. That same morning, a journalist at Telltale's Media, Jenny Rivers, launched a 20-minute expose titled, "How One Teen Boy Silently Rewired American Air Travel." It opened with no music, just grainy footage of Avery being removed from 1A. No yelling, no shouting. Just that one moment where the flight attendant ripped the boarding pass from his hand like it didn't belong to him. And his face. That calm, stunned, not going to fight you face. Janet's voiceover was soft but firm. This is not a story about rage. It's not even about race, though race lit the match. This is a story about what happens when quiet dignity meets quiet power. When someone builds something instead of breaking down. And how one 19-year-old boy became the reason over 72 million passengers now fly under ethical protection. The story exploded. CNN requested an exclusive. BBC called his school. Airline CEOs were summoned to Senate hearings. One senator held up a printed screenshot from the Clearport grid showing a red flight with 13 minor violations and said, "This isn't just oversight, this is negligence." Another asked flatly, "Why did it take a teenager to do what your legal departments never had the courage to?" But Avery stayed away from the noise. He didn't go viral. He didn't give interviews. He didn't want the spotlight. Instead, he wrote a quiet message on his personal site. "I wasn't trying to start a movement. I was trying to get to Seattle. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I was just tired of shrinking to fit into spaces I already belonged in. If the system is better now, it's because too many people had stories they never got to tell. I just made a place where they could be heard." Thousands of comments poured in. "You gave me back my voice. My daughter's flying next week and I feel safer now. I was 8 months pregnant and told to sit by the bathroom because a businessman wanted my aisle seat. I've never spoken about it until now. Thank you." And among those was a short comment from someone with the username CW1956. "Back in '78, I was told to sit in the back of the plane so no one would be uncomfortable. I'm 67 now. My grandson just got his first job in aerospace ethics. He says the grid is what made him believe things could change. Thank you for giving us a future." Meanwhile, the flight attendant who kicked Avery from 1A, her name, Lynette Powell, was now trending for a different reason. After internal review and multiple passenger testimonies, she was permanently removed from commercial service under the FAA's revised Code of Conduct for Federal Aviation Personnel. She wasn't fired because she yelled. She was fired because she lied on her ethics compliance forms, and the system caught it. Her story became a warning in every crew training program. Bias isn't just about intention, it's about impact, and now it leaves a trail. The final chapter of Avery's flight came quietly. On a late spring morning, he boarded a plane to San Francisco. Seat 1A. No one questioned him. No one glared. No one said, "You don't belong here." As the plane began to taxi, a soft voice leaned over from 1B. A white man, mid-50s, quiet eyes. He said, "I read what you built." Avery looked over. The man nodded, not intrusive, just genuine. "Thanks for making the skies a little more honest." Avery smiled. "I just wanted a fair seat." The man chuckled. "Well, you gave the rest of us one too." They didn't talk the rest of the flight. Didn't have to. Above the clouds, some things didn't need to be said. They were already working. Exactly 1 year later, they called it the Grid Accord. The FAA held a press conference that looked more like a United Nations summit. Flags behind the podium, a wall of cameras, 12 microphones, and one phrase repeated in every official speech: passenger ethics is no longer optional. Clearport had started as a beta system, quiet, internal, voluntary. Now, it was the new backbone of U.S. aviation ethics. And as of that morning, every domestic and international airline operating in or over American airspace was required to comply or forfeit FAA route certification. It was no longer just about Aerostar or one bad flight. This was systemic. This was structural. And this time, the structure answered to the passengers, not the other way around. Behind closed doors, airline executives scrambled to meet new benchmarks. Tier 1 compliance scorecards, real-time passenger incident logs, mandatory ethics, dashboards for crew, annual AI flag reviews of onboard interactions. The data wasn't hidden anymore. It lived in plain sight. If a gate agent mistreated someone based on appearance, flagged. If a crew member failed to intervene when a passenger was harassed, logged. If a child, disabled traveler, or elder was asked to give up a seat without consent, recorded. The grid didn't punish feelings. It measured patterns, and the results were devastating for some. 3 legacy airlines missed the compliance threshold in Q2 and lost transatlantic access for 14 days. The financial hit: over $270 million in canceled routes and penalties. And the message was clear. This isn't a PR policy. This is a federal protocol. At the same time, airline unions began negotiating new training contracts, demanding proactive ethics education, not just reactive crisis control. Even flight academies changed. Students no longer just learned altitude and approach speeds. They trained in bias recognition, nonverbal de-escalation, trauma-informed passenger care. Because the sky, they realized, was never neutral. It reflected everything below. And now it had a mirror. Meanwhile, Avery, he hadn't gone public once since his quiet message the year before. He refused TV deals, declined sponsorships, deleted social media altogether. But that didn't mean he was gone. In fact, that week, he sat across from FAA Director Elaine Cruz inside a federal tech facility just outside D.C., watching real-time analytics feed from Clearport's core grid. "You don't say much," Elaine said, glancing over. "I already said what I needed to," Avery replied, eyes still on the monitor. Elaine smiled. "I heard Delta just adopted the full ethics transparency stack voluntarily. No legal push, no contract threats. People learn when they're ready," Avery said simply. "You proud of that?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I'm just relieved it didn't take another kid getting kicked out of 1A. Outside, a press van rolled past the gate. Someone inside asked, "Who's that kid next to the FAA director?" No one could answer, and that was fine, because Avery never needed credit. He just wanted systems that didn't wait for someone to be famous to matter. Back in the press room, FAA Chairwoman Cruz stepped to the podium. Her voice was firm, composed, final. "Today, with the signing of the Passenger Ethics Accord, we close a chapter in American aviation history, the one where silence protected the system. We open a new chapter where data protects the people. We don't just ask if passengers feel safe, we measure it. And we don't wait until someone screams to take action. We act when the quiet ones are harmed." Behind her, on a screen the size of a billboard, the Clearport dashboard flickered green for 94% of flights. It had started with 1, and now it was everywhere. 1 year, 4 months, 12 days. That's how long it had been since Avery Monroe was kicked out of seat 1A for simply sitting where his ticket said he belonged. Today, he was back on a plane. Same airline, same route, same seat. The aircraft hummed quietly as it rolled down the tarmac at JFK, preparing for takeoff to Seattle. But something was different this time. No sidelong glances, no whispered doubts, no, "Are you sure you're in the right cabin?" Just a nod from the flight attendant and a glass of water handed with respect. As Avery settled into his seat, he noticed a boy, maybe 10 years old, walking down the aisle with his mother. He had big glasses and a red NASA hoodie 2 sizes too large, a window seat in economy. Row 14. But the kid was looking right at him, not staring, just studying, like he knew. And Avery gave him a small, almost invisible nod. The boy lit up, just for a second, then looked away, cheeks red, as if embarrassed to be seen hoping for something. Avery knew that look. He remembered that look. He had lived that look. Back when a seat on a plane wasn't just about where you sat, but about who the world said you were allowed to be. Now, things were different. Not perfect, but different. Clearport was standard protocol. Gate agents were trained to check behavior logs, not assumptions. Flight crews were scored on ethics, not just efficiency. And passengers? Passengers started to believe their presence mattered, without needing to raise their voice. Somewhere overhead, the digital grid pulsed quietly, watching, learning, protecting. And in that moment, Avery didn't feel proud. He felt still, as if the storm had passed, and now all that remained was the work of keeping the skies clear. The flight lifted off. Clouds parted. The ground fell away, and Avery pulled a small notepad from his jacket. Worn edges, black leather. He flipped to a page that had only 1 sentence. Build something no one can ignore. It was something his mom had told him back when he first started tinkering with Clearport as a side project in high school. Back when he thought it would be nothing more than an academic demo. He smiled at the thought. She never got to see the system go live, but she saw the first spark. He looked out the window. Below, cities shrank into grids, neatly ordered systems of movement and direction. Up here, it was quiet. And that's when the seatbelt light turned off, and a gentle voice said, "Excuse me." It was the boy. From row 14. I saw your picture on the FAA site," the kid said, voice shaking a little. "Are you the guy who made the thing that stops mean flight people from yelling at kids?" Avery blinked. "That's one way to put it," he said, laughing gently. "Yeah, I helped build that." The boy's eyes went wide. "I want to build something like that, maybe for schools, 'cause teachers yell too." Avery nodded slowly. "That's a good idea." The boy looked around. "They said I can't sit up here, but I just wanted to say thanks." "You just did," Avery said. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a tiny metal badge, one of the early Clearport beta test tags. It was small, no bigger than a coin, etched with the grid logo and the words, "Dignity is a right." He handed it to the kid. The boy stared at it like it was a treasure. "I can keep it?" "Only if you promise to build your thing one day." The kid nodded. "I will," then ran back to row 14 like he was holding the infinity gauntlet. Avery leaned back, and for the first time in months, he closed his eyes. Not because he was tired, but because something inside him was finally at peace. Down the aisle, a flight attendant picked up a cup someone had dropped and gently asked a woman if she needed anything extra for her son's allergies. Across the cabin, a gate manager reviewed a real-time dashboard showing all green. And outside the aircraft, a small ripple moved through the cloud layer. Just air, just nature, just the world shifting forward. The systems were working. The people were learning. And somewhere in row 14, a boy in a NASA hoodie was dreaming about building something better. Tell us where you're watching from. And what would you have told that little boy in row 14? Would you have handed him the badge? Or reminded him the world doesn't always play fair? Comment below, because sometimes one small moment in the sky can shape someone's future on the ground.